In this episode of the How to Get on Reality TV podcast, we take a look at the Southern stereotype in casting. Welcome to the How to Get on Reality TV podcast with Dan Giesling, where I answer your reality TV casting questions once a week. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the How to Get on Reality TV podcast. My name's Dan Giesling, and as always, I'm excited to be bringing this podcast to you right from my home. Actually, today it's first podcast. If you notice a little bit audio difference, it shouldn't be very slightly if you're listening on the podcast or in audio format. In video format, you obviously notice a big change. I recently set up my home office, which gives me a little more flexibility. Doesn't really have anything to do with affecting the quality or the content of the show, but for those of you guys saying, hey Dan, that's not your normal background, you're right. Outside of that, I hope everyone's getting prepared for a joyous and happy holiday, Christmas, whatever you celebrate. And we have a great question. It's not really a question this week. We have a great case study. And I really love doing these every so often on the podcast because it's what I do in the personal video reviews. And sometimes, I don't talk about it often, but I offer it as a service. I get a lot of emails saying, hey, Dan, will you check out my audition video? Hey, will you watch this audition video? Give me your feedback. And as much as I'd love to, I just don't have that kind of time. But I do offer it as a service through my website as the individual audition video review. And what it comes with my first impression. So I watch your video and record the audio file of me watching for the first time, much like a director's commentary, except a first impressions. And then after I watch it the first time, I record that audio file, I go back and dissect it and then record another audio file giving you direct changes you need to make to your audition video with 3 specific must changes. And I offer that as a service through the website at howtogetonrealitytv.net/video-review. I've done it for a lot of people, and this is going to be this case study that was sent in. I don't think he meant it for it to be broken down this way, but I'm going to help him in that way. And because it's very similar to what I would do for you, if you were to use that service. So if you want to check that out, you can check it out by going to howtogetonrealitytv.net/video-review. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this week's case study from Hank, which takes a unique look at the Southern stereotype.
Hey Dan, it's Hank. I'm a redneck lawyer who loves to raise hell. I've overcome growing up in an impoverished and rural part of the country to be the first person in my family to graduate college. And then I went on and graduated law school. Now even as an educated man, nothing beats a bonfire on the hill, listen to some good old bluegrass music, and drinking some good strong drink. However, my Huck Finn outgoing nature kicks in every now and then and gets me itching for another adventure. So I gotta leave this holler, and I'll even go out to California with all those liberal nut jobs if I have to play this Big Brother game. So Dan, it's obvious that I'm going to fall into the Southern stereotype, but that's my story. So that's the story I gave when I submitted my application, and I put with it a recent photo of me in a suit, because I am now a lawyer. However, later, I saw that James's photo from last year, he was wearing camo. So did the redneck lawyer make a fatal mistake by not posting one of his photos, horseback riding or with a fish he had just caught or a deer he just killed or something of that nature? I was wondering about your thoughts. Thanks, Dan.
All right, Hank, first and foremost, thank you so much for submitting such a detailed look at what you sent in, I'm guessing as an audition video. And at this point, I hope that you haven't submitted it because there's a lot of things that we'd like to change. But first off, let's start off with your opening. And, Hank also asked a question at the end about which photo is the best to select. And I feel like that's going to help a lot of people in this podcast. But in particular, I want to break down Hank's audition like I said, in a personal audition video review. And the first thing that kind of jumps out is he calls himself the redneck lawyer, which is a great way to self-stereotype. Now, I'm not sure, I don't know the connotations and or, if it's a derogatory statement not to call someone a redneck. I would infer that, but if you call yourself a redneck, I think that gives a very nicely gift-wrapped bow to hand at casting. So, if they're talking about people, and they're deciding to put together their cast, they're like, oh yeah, Hank is the redneck lawyer. Everyone's going to associate you with being that person. So you do a great job right off the bat introducing yourself as that. But throughout your audition video, this is what I would do. Here's the big changes. Things that stand out about your personal audition and everything that you've done and said throughout there. It sounded like you put some thought into it, which is great. At some point, it sounded a little scripted, but let me break this down a little further. Things I liked, okay? The fact that you put yourself as a redneck lawyer. Second thing, you talked about, you come from a very poor upbringing. That's really, really interesting for you to overcome all of that to become a successful lawyer. So one of the things that is missing as a overall thing from your audition video, and this is what I often have to help people with in these audition video reviews, is you have to tell stories to back up the most interesting parts of your audition video. So for the fact that, you said you struggled from, a not well-to-do family to putting yourself through college and graduating. Well, what was that like? Tell a story about how poor you were. Don't just say, hey, I came from a poor family. Say, hey, I was from such a poor family that, we ate X, Y, and Z, 7 days a week to get by, or I had to work 2 jobs, when I was in 6th grade. But tell a story that describes that to people, because what that does is, you say I come from a poor background, cool, but when you tell a story, it really connects with someone, whether it's someone that is sympathetic, someone that can relate to it, someone that may say that not have any sympathy for you, but they're going to have some sort of feeling for that. And the way you do this by reinforcing stories. So I would definitely delve into that a little bit in your audition video. The second thing, you paint a nice picture saying, hey, I'm this redneck lawyer. And, I'm guessing that at some point, you've reached some sort of echelon of financial freedom or financial success. But you're like, hey, I still enjoy sitting on the hill, listening to bluegrass and drinking, I think you call it strong drink. Which is cool because you paint this picture, so I would also tell a story about maybe how you fit into that area. What is that like for you? How do your friends and family react to you being, maybe you're one of the few successful people, successful in, a financial sense, in your family. So I would tell a story about that, how you can relate to maybe both circles. The second thing, where it kind of tailed off for me, in terms of listening to your audition video, and it's not really your video, but this is how I assume your audition would be. You talk about you like going on Huck Finn adventures. I feel like there you're kind of, I don't want to say cheesing it, but you're cheesing this Southern stereotype a lot. And you also say, hey, I'm going to go out to LA with these liberal nut jobs. Whether or not you think that way, you need to back that up. You just kind of gloss over both of those things once again, without telling any stories to reinforce that. Why do you have a certain particular view? How do you feel that way? What would, tell a story about how you confronted one, or how you think about someone, how you think about the presidential candidates on either side. That's going to invoke emotions with a lot of people, besides just saying, hey, I don't want to be around liberals, or, or that sort of thing. One of the other things I like that you said is you said you like to raise hell. That's another thing. Okay, that's a well thought out part of your introduction, but what does that mean? Does it mean like you're ghost riding a truck into a swamp? I don't know what that means. So tell a story about that. This is a theme that everyone can take. Don't just, and it's hard to say, don't just talk about it, be about it, but don't just say you're something. Explain how you are that thing, that stereotype, that component of your story, or that component of your character through a story. That's the best way to get your emotions, to get your character across, is by telling stories, as opposed to just saying, I'm this X, Y, and Z. So now I'm going to transition into, your real question, which was, hey, what sort of photo should I send in? And I think you're in a really unique position. The photo I would have sent in for you, I would have sent in a few. I would have sent in a photo of you in your lawyer garb with maybe an element of Southern whatever, whether it's hunting on it. So whether you're in a suit with like, a cowboy hat, a suit with something like, so it embodies your work as well as part of your personality. So I would have done that. I would have just done a lawyer picture, and I would have done a picture of you like in your element in the South. So I would do like work, I would do your element, and then I'd do a picture of the meshing of the two without it looking staged. I know that sounds hard to do, but it's really not. So overall, Hank, I think you're on the right path. You have a great understanding of who you are. I would definitely add some inflection into how you're telling your story. I think your story is really close. Once again, I'd back up a few things. I'd focus on being a redneck lawyer. How is that in the courtroom? Tell stories about that. I would talk about your poor upbringing, tell stories about how that was growing up. And I would also get into a little bit more about your political beliefs through stories and saying how you would interact with people. Those are just 3 things right off the bat I would work on and change before you submit your audition video. So I hope this helps. And, Hank, as a small thank you for submitting, this case study. And I think that you listen to the other podcasts like, hey, if I tell my story to Dan, he's probably going to break it down. And so every so often I like doing these case studies. So Hank, as a small thank you, we're going to send you a free digital copy of my story, How a Normal Guy Got Cast on Reality TV. And if you want your case study or your question answered on the podcast, you can go to howtogetonrealitytv.net/ask. You can submit the question through your phone, through your app, through your computer, through a tablet. It's really easy. Just leave a voicemail. You can change your name if you don't want to use your real first name. But be sure to leave a detailed question like Hank so I can help you and help everyone else in the process. So Hank, best of luck, and I hope you take those action steps to help hone in your audition video. All right, so that wraps up another episode of the How to Get on Reality TV podcast. If you want your audition broken down like Hank, you can check out the service that I offer through the website. It's a complete review. It comes with a first impression audio file. It comes with a specific breakdown, much like you just heard with Hank, except a little bit more in depth because I can see a lot of visual things. So, it's a really, really straightforward process in terms of how you send your audition video to me. I break it down for you and give you the must-make changes to your audition video, and then we'll do a final review at the end. So it comes with that first impression videos, the audio coaching, if you will, audio changes you need to make, and of course the 3 must-make changes to your audition video to put you in a position to be more successful. If you want to check that out, you can go to howtogetonrealitytv.net/audition, howtogetonrealitytv.net/video-review. There's all the information there and how you can access that and tap into that service. It's helped a lot of people in the past, and it's a good way if you really are like, hey Dan, this is my best shot. I want your critique. And that's the thing about this. If you do decide to move forward and use that, it's no holds bar. I'm going to be very critical because that's what you're going to need. And if, I always tell people, I preface people when I send them the audio files and say, hey, look, be very critical, but it's not to make you feel, it's not to belittle you or anything like that. It's to make you better and put you in a position to be more successful. So the more critical I am, I think the better it helps you. I'm not mean about it, but, just so you understand. A lot of people are making an audition video for the first time, getting ready to submit them after the holiday season, and it's not an easy thing, sitting in front of a camera and telling people how great you are. A lot of people need some guidance, and this is the way, I can guide you in a one-on-one situation. So if you want to check that out, you can go to howtogetonrealitytv.net/video-review, and, we'll take it from there. So anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast, the different kind of case study one. And I will see you guys next Monday. Later, guys.